A long time ago, I made a video about the 3 kinds of storytellers, and I think this is actually really important, and it comes up in a lot of my other videos. A new video with higher production values was warranted. There are 3 kinds of storytellers. There's the storyteller, the story crafter, and something that is a little bit newer to my thinking is the story shaper. The storyteller is that guy at the bar. He can spin a yarn, he can tell a compelling story in the moment with very little prep and very little direction in his own mind. He's just spinning and telling the story to his audience, and it's this very interactive, very engaging process. Storytellers have a natural presentation style. They usually have a strong tone of voice, they are very engaging, people hang on their words and want to listen to what they're saying. So because of that, they're able to engage an audience for pretty much as long as they want to talk. But that smoothness, that cleanliness sometimes masks a lack of actual preparation. There might not really be a story behind the story that they're telling. They might just be telling. As a result, you can end up with these very inspiring speeches that crumble and collapse after everyone leaves the room. Most of you have probably had that experience where you talked to someone, they were very engaging, you were very on board, and then as you thought about it back at your desk or in the car ride home, you realized that actually, no, wait, there's nothing there. This is just a bunch of nonsense. There's nothing really more to this. Storytellers, though, are very good at getting you that meeting, because they're the ones that can get someone to listen in the literal elevator pitch. They're the ones that can get someone to pay attention long enough to get the next phone call. So the story crafter is focused on preparation. They put their effort into building the perfect deck, into wordsmithing the perfect tagline, into making sure that their argument is persuasive all by itself. Their style of presentation might not be as smooth, it might not be as natural, but if they can get people in the meeting room to sit down and listen to their presentation, they can often tell a story that will stand the test of time. Casey Hudson is actually one of the strongest story crafters that I've ever worked with. He had the ability to build persuasive arguments that would outlast his involvement in the argument. As we get into my discussion about Anthem, one thing you'll see is that essentially Dragon Age 4 was fighting against the ghost of a story that Casey had told years before, and often losing that battle. So he had crafted such an effective story that it was able to fight and survive on its own. One of the dangers of the story crafter is because their story is so well crafted, it's because so much time has gone into its creation, sometimes their presentation style can be quite rigid. If they end up on the wrong foot, if they end up presenting to someone who isn't really buying the story that they are telling, it can be very difficult or even impossible for them to adjust that story to that audience. This can result in them being very offside occasionally. I've watched story crafters have a very established, well-worn story that they're used to using to get their way, and then have someone challenge that story and that story crafter not know what to do, basically just be trapped in the story that they're telling, even though that story is just digging them a deeper and deeper hole. At first blush, it might seem like the story shaper is something that would fall in between story crafter and storyteller. And it isn't exactly that. I think it's something else. This is the kind of storyteller that I am. And story shaping is about building and evolving your story with the audience that you're interacting with. This allows you to really customize your story to fit the audience that you're talking to and to make them feel like they're involved in the process. There is a danger with it that you can become too eager to change your story and morph it, and you end up promising things that you shouldn't be because you've gotten into this feedback loop with your intended audience and you're spinning your story off into directions that you shouldn't. Story shaping requires some degree of prep, not as much as a story crafter needs, and has some degree of agility, but not the same as what a storyteller has. Obviously my preferred style, but it does have its own dangers as well. Obviously we have skills in all of these things. I'm probably a C- storyteller and a B+ story crafter, but the thing that I'm really good at is the story shaping, that interaction with the audience, which does mean that being a YouTube personality is kind of an odd choice because we find ourselves in a medium that doesn't have a lot of back and forth. I don't have a lot of ability to adjust what I'm doing and saying based upon our interactions. There's a little bit, but not as much as I am used to. You may find yourself in a situation where you are really strong in one of these, but you need to make sure that those weaknesses don't get you into trouble. So what do you do? If you're a storyteller, it's really about having something behind the story that you're about to tell. Yes, you are spinning that yarn. Yes, you are getting people engaged. But if you are in the boardroom doing the bigger presentation, have something to back up what you're saying. Have some guardrails around yourself to keep you from saying whatever you need to say to keep the story spinning. You ideally would have a story crafter on your team that can work with you to build a deck, to build something that can serve as a backstop to prevent you from spinning a story that is ultimately impossible. Now, story crafters can sometimes just prep their way to success. I've seen story crafters who built amazing presentations and just practiced and smoothed out all of the rough edges until their presentation was just perfect. That works great if you've hit your audience dead on. If everyone in the audience is exactly what you thought they were going to be, then you are going to have a great time because you've prepped the crap out of yourself and you are presenting exactly to the audience you thought you were. If you've missed the mark somewhat and you find yourself bouncing off the audience who isn't quite receptive to what you're saying, or you find that they're throwing you a curveball, ideally you would have someone else in the audience on your side who is a story shaper or a storyteller who can cover the gaps that may start to form in your preparation. So if you're a story shaper working on your own, it's about iteration. It's about getting some sort of story crafted down on paper and then presenting it to someone. Not your final audience, because you're going to wear them down if you are using them to do your shaping through the process, but someone that is close to your final audience. So as you're shaping, as you're morphing, as you're building this initial story, you are doing it in the right direction. Then when you are in the room with your actual audience, allow yourself to continue to be fluid and to continue to fill the story and shape the story towards the actual audience that you're presenting to. But make sure you know where the edges are. Make sure you know that you can't just shape your story in any way, that there are lines you can't cross. Ideally, you have a team that consists of people who are all of these kinds of things. And you can use the storyteller to get yourself the initial meeting, the story crafter to build the perfect deck and presentation and material for the presentation that you are going to give. And then you can use the story shaper in the room to build and shape and lock in to the actual story that your audience wants to hear. But that's not always the case, and sometimes you are going to have to cover your own weaknesses without having people with the other kinds of skills. We all tell stories. Stories are how we communicate with each other, and having the good ability to tell a good story is a way to engage your audience and get what you want. Regardless of the role you find yourself in, being aware of the kind of stories that you tell and how you tell stories can help you do a better job in your day-to-day. Special thanks to my members. They provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. If you're interested in becoming a member, there's a link to that down in the description. We have merch now. This is the High Tea on the High Seas hoodie, which is maybe warmer than I expected. If you're interested in picking up some of that merch, there's a shelf below this video to check that out. What kind of storyteller do you think you are? How do you go about telling stories? What are some tricks that you found that help you engage an audience? Let me know these things down in the comments. I will see you again soon. Thank you.